Casey Gray, welcome to the ROI Online Podcast.
Thanks so much for having me on the show.
So it's like I've had several folks with colors for the last name on my podcast. So, it would make sense that we would include you as well. So welcome. And you have a podcast yourself, the Conscious Builder Show. And then your website is the Conscious Builder. And then you're coming up with an academy by the same name. Kind of tell everybody a little bit. My audience we have a lot of business owners, entrepreneurs, marketing directors, etc. Just kind of give us a little bit of your backstory on your construction business in Canada and why you chose to do it the way that you do it.
Yeah, so I guess we'd have to go back a little bit to about, 8 years ago. But, I started the business about 10 years, been in construction 17 years at this point. But 8 years ago is when my wife and I found out that we were having our first and what ended up being our only child. Mm-hmm. And around that time, we also did our first Tony Robbins event. And if you've ever, I don't know if you're familiar with Tony Robbins or anything, but people who go to his events come back on like cloud nine and they drank the Kool-Aid, so to speak, right? That's the joke when you come out of it. So a lot of that stuff happened. But what happened with both of those events, or those two big events essentially, is that our mindset started to shift. And it started to shift in a way that we started asking ourselves more questions. And really the question was why? Why do we do what we do? Mm-hmm. And at the time, early 20s, I started the construction company. I just wanted to make some money, do good work, provide a living for myself and for my fiance at the time. And wasn't really asking why, other than the why was, well, I just want to make money. Right. But then with those events, we started asking why. Okay, well, there's got to be more than that. Obviously, money is important. We all need money to live and survive and so forth. But then when it really hit me is when we found out we were pregnant with what ended up being a son. We didn't know at the time. And I was thinking, if I'm going to tell him that he can be and do whatever he wants, I have to do the same. I have to lead by example, as opposed to just telling him to do. Because what I've realized is that my son's been my greatest teacher in that he does what I do, not what I say. Right? So that's, I learned that later on, but that was kind of the beginning, right? So that was the consciousness that was brought to us, right? Hence the Conscious Builder. So it wasn't the Conscious Builder when I started the company, but my wife and I did start the Conscious Living podcast. And that was kind of the beginning. And the Conscious Builder was actually the tagline for my construction company at the time. And then eventually we turned it into the construction name and we kind of built on that. But the word conscious to us is really a state of awareness. And you can't make a change if you're not aware of what needs to be changed in the first place. So that's where we kind of started rebranding and really focusing on that word and helping people raise their consciousness. And in construction, obviously there's a million ways to do what we do. We're not going to sit in front of somebody and tell them they should do it this way or should do it that way. Instead, we want to give them options so that they can make a conscious decision, because we're all different. We all have different budgets. We all have different needs, different wants. It's not us to say you should use that product or use this product. It's for us to say, here are the options. Here's what we believe is best, but you choose what's best for you.
So talk to us a little bit about the deliberate, the conscious effort of discerning your why. That's just, just go, okay, we need to find a why, and then boop, it pops out. There's a bit of a process. Talk to us about the process you went through to identify it and to really get the words in place. Because you have kind of an idea, but it's some work to get it identified, written out, and then the conviction to say it and to defend it.
Yeah. If I'm perfectly honest, I'm probably still trying to figure it out. And to some extent, it might change. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to pretend I have it all figured out, but I do know what I'm good at. And every day that goes by, I do get wiser and I get better at what I do. And what I've realized is that we need to focus on our strengths and find somebody else to fill our weaknesses, especially when we're in business. And I'm good at, Bill, I don't swing the hammer much anymore, but I understand construction. I've gotten better at business. I'm good at communicating with people. I can get my message across. I'm very trusting in the process and in a higher power, like knowing that I can't, the only thing that I can really control is myself, my reaction and my action and my thoughts. I actually, I shouldn't say that. I can't really control my thoughts. They come in. I just control whether or not I want to attach to those, but that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
But by knowing that, I've become, I've kind of stepped into what I feel like I'm supposed to be doing. Right. And helping other businesses, we do what we do on the, with homeowners and helping them build better homes. But I know that we can have a big impact by continuing to show people what we do and what's possible for living in a healthy, comfortable home, an efficient home by default. Right. So I've kind of moved away from that a little bit, then back to it and away and back to it. And I've realized that everything keeps bringing me back to it. So it is my why. Like I know that I can help people be healthier and be more conscious by talking about business and building better homes.
I think about when I was younger, 20, even 30s, it's like who I was then and who I am now, and what was important to me then and what's important to me now have really changed. Well, there's some things I would agree that are similar, but what I was really thinking I knew and was the best at has changed. And that's interesting that you start your journey. I think we all think we know. We're super smart at that age anyway, but what have you learned that you don't know since your son has arrived? What's been some of the lessons that have kind of shocked you?
Well, like I said, the first one was, he does what I do, not what I say. So if he has a bad habit, he probably got it from me, not from mommy. Especially the frustration portion. I think the biggest thing that's helped is understanding the importance of psychology. I talk about this a lot now. I remember telling my wife, because she's by trade, like she went to school, she has her master's in clinical psychology. She's not practicing anymore, but she is a child and family therapist. And I remember when she was going to school for that, I'm like, psychology, I don't need to know about that stuff. It's not that important, but that's everything. That's marketing, right? That has everything to do with life, right? Life, business, it's 80% psychology, 20% mechanics. And if you don't work on yourself, you can't expect other parts of your life to get better. So the number one thing that I've learned over the last 8 years, since I started the personal development journey, so to speak, which never really ends, is that the best investment you can make is in yourself. I've spent way more money on mastermind groups and personal development books and live programs, not so much anymore, than I would have spent if I went to school, right? Because I'm a carpenter by trade, so I didn't have the university bills that a lot of people have, but I've spent way more than university bills on everything else that I've done.
So where does that bleed over? Where do these lessons bleed over into how you manage your business now? In these epiphanies that you stumbled into, where does the rubber hit the road on the business side of things?
Well, it comes down to people, because especially in the position in the business that I'm in, it's not only do I have to manage my own state, I have to be able to manage homeowners, clients, and people change when you're working on their home. If whether you've either had a renovation done or built a custom home, or you're a contractor, you get it. I have to manage employees, and then I have to manage subcontractors, subtrades, suppliers, and then obviously there's the home side of things too, right? So it all starts with myself, but that psychology aspect of it flows into everything, right? It's how I communicate, and it's understanding why other people react, and getting yourself and the ego out of the way. Because when somebody gets upset, maybe they're not upset at you, right? It's not all about you. They could just be upset at the situation, and you just happen to be the person that's there at the time. And it bleeds everywhere, really, right? That's what it is.
Yeah, I think the biggest challenge leaders face is how to communicate the vision for each aspect of where you're leading them. It's clear in your head, super clear. And even though you think you've told them, or you've shared it, or you somehow described it, what what the picture is in their mind is shockingly to me is like really different. And until you really define it and review it in some way, whether it's like writing down that vision, having a very clear scope of work, images, whatever, it's it can be a very different monster in their head.
Yeah. And I think to some extent too, we have to not get stuck on the how, right? So when you have a vision or you're aiming for a goal, a destination, whatever it may be, and I recommend that you always have a new goal before you reach for the goal that you're going after, so you don't lose momentum. But I think people a lot of times get stuck on the how, so they stop taking action because they're trying to figure out the how. Or I've never been afraid. I'm more like the bull in the china shop. My partner and brother in business, Chad, he's definitely more methodical. He's the engineer, systems, processes, which is good. So that's why we understand each other's strengths and we can play off that, right? Where I'm just like, oh, I'm just going to go and I'm going to start running with this. And he's like, whoa, 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 wait a minute, right? So it's good, like give and take, push, pull sort of thing. But what that also allows me to do is I don't feel like I need to micromanage people. When I'm talking to people, to your point, is getting the vision out there and you say like, look, this is the direction we're going. This is what I want to accomplish. How we accomplish that? I have no idea. But we just need to start trying things and we need to throwing spaghetti at the wall and we need to see what works. Podcasting, the YouTube channel, everything, like from a marketing perspective, those are things that we've been doing. And has it exploded? No, but we can see it getting better and better and starting to see that exponential growth on everything that we've been doing. Like you were mentioning before we started recording, really, is you're asking how things are going. Like we can't keep up now, right? All the work that we've been doing, we're an overnight success, 10 years in the making, right?
Yeah.
It's finally kind of paying off. And we're at the point where we've hired, since COVID has hit, we've hired 5 people. And that's, considering we were only around 8 before COVID, that's a significant increase in the percentage, right? So it's been just taking action and consistently moving in the same direction.
Well, let's talk about that. You've hired 5 people, but they're not construction people. And one would assume, if listening, oh, he's in construction, he hired 5 people. You hired 5 people to help build more homes or more walls or whatever it is that you're doing. But that's not the case.
No. So we did hire 2 construction people that are coming on. Well, they will be coming on. We hired 2 people to help. Actually, sorry, we hired 3 people in the office, 2 of them more on the marketing and content and a new kind of division that we're working on within the business with regards to doing an actual series and getting sponsors for that series. And then we just hired a salesperson today, actually, that will be starting after Labor Day weekend here. So I guess that's 6 people that ultimately we'll end up bringing on over this time. And we'll probably need more the way things are going, right? But to some extent, we know that it's slow. When you bring people on, it kind of adds extra work to the plate because you have to train them and you get them up to speed, but then they slowly start to take over things, assuming everything works out. And we have a pretty strict hiring process that we follow now I think it's let us down once, but it's nothing like what it used to be when we just try and hire whoever was coming to us. So that's been a huge help as well.
So that's kind of unusual. You're a construction company, and the folks that I usually work with, they're all over the board as far as type of industries. But one of the things I really try to coach them on is you need to change your mindset of how you see your company. Your company really, it's incumbent upon it to actually start to see your company as a multimedia publishing house, not a construction company in your case. But why? What's going on with you? What convinced you? And then that's a totally different set of skills and direction from where you started 8 years ago.
Yeah, that's a good point. Like I mentioned that to our team too, is that we're a media company first and construction company second. And to some extent,
think of the statement you just said. there's a big mind shift there.
Yeah.
Let's let's spend some time developing that, because the folks that are listening, I think they're feeling it, but maybe that conversation hasn't really gone around in some of their heads, and it'd be interesting to hear what that sounded like in yours.
Yeah. So it's like, I get it. So when I started learning all this stuff, because I've done, like I said, a bunch of personal development, business courses, all sorts of stuff. And this is stuff that's taught all over the place, but it's true. Like you hear it, you don't do anything with it. We started doing it pretty quick. To me, it just made sense. And on that action, I'm like, I didn't even know what a podcast was. I remember it was one of my employees. She's like, "Do you listen to podcasts?" I'm like, "No, not really. What are podcasts?" And she's like, "Here's a podcast." 6 weeks later, we had a podcast. we just made it happen, right? And it had nothing to do with construction. It was the Conscious Living podcast I'd mentioned earlier with my wife and I. But that was kind of the beginning of, okay, there's potential in this. But what's interesting is that when you become a media company first, when you start to educate others, right? That's how you gain trust, is to teach people how to do things. Whether they hire you or not, it's a way of giving back to the industry, whatever industry you're in. That's the way I see it. We're going to put all this content out there. Most of the people who listen to our stuff will not ever spend a dime with us. And we're okay with that, because we're putting it out there, and there's other ways. We don't need everybody to hire us or spend money on us. That's not why we're doing it. One of the biggest takeaways that we get from it is that it forces us to be at the top of our game. So by us putting our neck out there and telling people or teaching people certain things about construction, interviewing people, whatever it may be, it forces us to be better, because one, we need to find the best of the best, and we need to know what we're talking about when we're on camera, whether it's myself or my team. I'm the one on camera for the most part, but my team is on camera on the site as well, right? So it keeps them on top of their game, because all of a sudden Brian shows up with the camera and he wants them to talk about the project and they need to know what they're talking about. So it forces us to just be better every single day and to stay in touch with what's happening in our industry right now.
So, all right. So you haven't convinced me, if I run a good, successful construction company. Okay, I need to be better, but where's this going to really help me grow the value of my business? Where's the ROI in that?
I guess it depends on where your business comes from and where you plan on taking your business, right? There's successful companies out there that will just run it on referrals. A lot of our work still comes from referrals. Mm-hmm. If your goal is to just stay as a 1 or 2, 3-man operation and just do kitchens and bathrooms, then this probably doesn't make sense, right? But if you want to grow, if you want to do something different, if you want to change the industry, this makes sense. For me, we want to have a big impact on the industry. We want to be seen as the leader in healthy, comfortable, and efficient building. That's our goal. That's the mission. And if we can, by doing that, like I said, we don't need to build all the houses. We can build a few houses a year and be totally fine. But if people learn from the few houses that we're building, then perfect. But as a business, this obviously opens us up to all sorts of other ways to generate income. So if there's anything I've learned from a business perspective, is if you think of your business as a Parthenon and you have all these pillars holding up your roof, if you only have one pillar and you only do kitchens and bathrooms, then all of a sudden people stop wanting to renovate kitchens and bathrooms, or maybe the economy goes crap, or pandemic or something. It actually seems to have done the opposite around here. But if you lose that pillar, your whole roof is coming down. But now all of a sudden we have income coming from renovations. We have income from custom homes. We have income from sponsorship. We have income from advertising on YouTube. So all of a sudden we're starting to actually build something to not actually that generates income as a business, which is great, but it also creates more opportunities for people within the business to move around too, right? So one of the things that I really love about being in the position that I'm in is that I can create opportunities for other people. Sure, it's fun to get jobs and build $1 million houses and so forth, but I get more excitement from creating an opportunity that somebody else can take advantage of within the business.
All right, it's starting to make sense now. Would you agree that you're getting more opportunities that offer you a chance to hang out in your best, where you really do your best work? There's a point when we're in survival or just need to make the bills, need to pay folks. So we'll take any job for a while, right? But when you start to define yourself, to define what you believe, actually show your work, actually set expectations that people should have of a particular job, then you start to attract those people, do you not?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Like we have people that want to work with us. We have people that reach out to us all the time now at this point. Absolutely.
Yeah. Uh, I had a conversation with JD Sherman. He's was the chief operating officer of HubSpot. He was talking about how people have changed the way they shop, live, and buy, or live, shop, and buy. There's some order that he says that. I'm messing it up, but it's like right now people are spending time and doing their research. They're investigating. They're deciding who they're going to go with before they even talk to them. So as far as the sales process, your first touch, your first experience that you're delivering is coming from a multimedia situation, be it a podcast, a conversation where they just heard you being interviewed, whether you're producing the content. That's where people are making the decision if they trust you, if you know what you're talking about, what's unique about what you have to offer, because everybody can build a house, even an uncle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's where you're starting to differentiate yourself. Give us some examples of results of this transition into the multimedia production of your business.
Examples in how we've done it, or examples of people who have found us through it. Or...
Yeah, and what has been their expectations? Are they like really difficult to work with, or like pleasant to work with?
They're actually way better.
Yeah.
So that's to your point, right? Is that it's everything that's online now is the first impression, right? That's basically for any company, the best salesperson should be the online presence, right? Mm-hmm. Then the salesperson that you have or whoever is there, that's kind of the second. You just need to close the deal essentially at that point, figure out how to deliver what the client wants. So the series that we have coming up, so we're doing like an official series called the 3-Day Cottage on our YouTube channel that will be released in the spring when we're done the project, and we're out looking for sponsors right now for it. But the homeowners that hired us for that project found us through our YouTube channel, and she reached out to us and said, "We really want to do this project." And at the time, I'm like her budget was low and wasn't sure how to do it, but she wanted to be involved too. I said, "Look, you're really enthusiastic about it. I don't know how we're going to make this work, but let's sign something. Let's just get it working. I think we can do a really cool YouTube series about it. If you're willing to work with me, it'll be the first time we've done it, but let's figure it out together and we'll get your cottage built." And that's what we're doing essentially, right? Is we're figuring out how to make this work. And she's been great because we're working more as a team as opposed to like a client customer relationship. Yes, there's still money that needs to exchange and so forth, but we're working together because we're splitting the sponsorship so they can save some costs and we can get paid for the time that we've had to put into it as well. And they're putting time into it, so they're basically getting paid for their costs and working with us and creating this. So we've created that new income stream and a new opportunity for clients as well. So they've found us, and like I said, they've been our best clients to work with. We also got a job for it was a renovation. It's kind of like an ongoing project. They keep bringing us back, but they found us through it. At first I said, "Look, we're too busy. We can't do it." And then we ended up having an opening. So I went back to her. I said, "Actually, we have an opening. Are you interested?" She's like, "Yeah." And she like signed the contract right there. There was no competition, right? We weren't bidding on a project. We weren't trying to convince them that we were better than the other person. They just loved what we stood for and they liked what we had to offer. She had actually ended up painting her island of her kitchen, custom paint color, the same color of my 1977 Volkswagen Westphalia van, because she liked it so much, which I had no idea she was doing till after I saw the picture, which is kind of funny. But cool. Yeah, like 2 examples of people just finding us through YouTube, and we're getting multiple leads every day, and they're finding us. They might say Google or something, but we're coming up in Google because we have so much content out there, right? That whether it's YouTube or blogs or podcasts, like there's no way that we're not going to be found because we constantly have things going out, like multiple things every week, whether I'm on somebody else's podcast, I'm interviewing somebody for a podcast, or we're doing a video or we're doing a site. There's so many things going out.
I do want to clarify for the American audience that project translates into project. What's a 3-day cottage?
So that's going to be a net zero cottage that we're building in the Algonquin Highlands area in Ontario. And it's called the 3-day cottage because, well, it's actually a joke. You got to watch, if you watch our teaser video, you'll see it. So go to our YouTube channel and watch the teaser videos on the 3-day cottage, and you'll find out why it's called that.
There you go. And there's a good call to action. So people are convinced, everybody that comes to us, they're convinced, I think we need to redo our website and we need to show up in all these searches, and they're expecting that we're going to go, oh yeah, we're experts in SEO, search engine optimization. And that's like the biggest boondoggle that you could focus all of your energies on, is to try to cram these keywords to get you to show up in the top of the search, when most people aren't even, they're going to swipe left when they see that your website's designed for robots and not for humans. But when you talk about being on podcasts, producing a podcast, creating videos, think about this. You're not just putting text on your static website, but you're actually starting to show up in the video layer. People are actually spending time just watching videos, and they may not be even going to Google. They may be hanging out on YouTube on how to do a cottage. Who knows what they're searching for? Audio. People are listening to podcasts. Many people don't even really get on the computer very often. They're listening and searching via podcast. So this is what I call HEO, is human experience optimization. And that's really, you're designing and creating content for, wait for it, humans who are going to purchase from you, who have names and faces and families and desires. Whereas if you're focusing all this time to please the Google robots, Google doesn't care about you, doesn't care about your business, doesn't care about your future. And even if you were at the top of the search, they may just decide to change the algorithms today and you're disappeared. Just like some political activists in some country where all of a sudden they are disappeared. Google can do that to you. But one way to avoid that is to consider all the examples that Casey's talking about. What are some other things that you're doing, Casey?
Other things that we're doing outside of the podcast and YouTube channel?
Yeah.
That's kind of our main focus. Obviously, we have social things out there, but getting on other people's podcasts has been helping. Actually, one thing I got to point out to continue on what you were just saying is that I love, Steve, all the stuff that you've doing, like how you've set up your podcast, right? And how you had these automatic emails, which made it really simple. And you go do this, and here's some great content. And I've actually been forwarding your emails to my team to say, like, look what Steve's doing. He's doing some really cool stuff. We got to learn from this guy because you made it really simple and straightforward, right? So thank you for doing that, because that's been helpful too. But it's made it easy for the human side of things to your point, right? So outside of that is I'm actually co-authoring a book with Kevin Harrington. He's from the Shark Tank. And so that'll be basically a glorified business card that really just, once again, gets me around the right people, creates opportunities. You never know where these things are going to go. I'm also, I haven't been doing this as much. Like, I have my own personal website. I did write over 400 blog posts. I wrote every single day for over a year. It was kind of like a public journal of things. It was actually quite therapeutic to do. So I'd recommend anybody trying that. That was really helpful. But yeah, the main focus has really been on YouTube, Facebook live interviews, getting on other people's podcasts, and really just getting as much content out there as possible and staying consistent. Right. So not doing something for a month or not. It's like, no, we want one or two, at least one video out every single week, if not two. Our goal is 2, and most weeks we're doing 2. And that translates into Facebook, into YouTube, also into podcasts.
So when I talk about businesses, there's this life cycle that a business has. If you think about when you started your business, you're in that toddler stage where you're just trying to like, I think I can do this, and let's get a job, and this, let's complete the job, and then you get some feedback and hey, we're kind of good at this, and but you run along, and then you start to kind of get in the groove, and then hey, we've got a little bit of a name around here now, and you've got people wanting to work for you, and but then there's this point where you could like rest on your laurels and stay busy from now on, and that's not bad, and that's what a lot of people do. But there's this thing that starts to happen in the back of your head where it's like, do I have a responsibility to be a mentor or to start being a thought leader is a word? I need to start sharing my unique perspective and insights from my experience so that others can benefit, even if they're a competitor, they're a budding construction person that's about to start get going, or maybe I'm someone considering to do my own work. Tell me, so this book that you mentioned, how much of that was in behind the scenes thinking and kind of convincing yourself you need to step up and write a book?
Well, books, like I said, they're kind of business cards. Like if you talk to authors, they never really make money off of it, right? It's just another way that creates that trust, right? This person knows what they're talking about, and it's beside a name that's well known, and then that it just adds to that trust factor, which is, I think, everything in business, right? Is you have to, people do business with people that they like and that they trust, right? It has to be both. So if they don't like me, that's fine. Not everyone's gonna like me. But yeah, that the whole, everything we do online is about trust. And the great thing about that and with the book is like, look, it's proof that we're not going anywhere. Like we're here to stay. Look at everything we have out there. We're not going to just do a job and then, 2 taillight warranty, you're gone and you'll never see us again, sort of thing. We put ourselves out there. We have a brand, we have a reputation that we want to maintain. And does that mean every job goes perfectly smooth and everything we do is perfect? No, there's going to be bumps and things happen, but we're not going anywhere. We're going to fix them and we're going to continue going forward, right? So that's just everything that I'm doing is really just solidifying that, telling the person you've made a good choice by hiring us because we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, but to go, all right, I'm going to write a book. There's this thing that went on in the back of your head is I'm really going to have to show that I know what I'm talking about. And do I really know what I'm talking about? And then, yeah, so I want to write a great book, not just a mediocre book, just because I want to tick off the task that I have a book. Talk to us about that. Has to bubble up from the Tony Robbins and the self-improvement conversations as well, no?
Yeah. And once again, when you commit to something like that, and I think a big thing is committing, like by me writing for 400 days straight, that gave me the confidence to be able to write. If you look at the very first blog post that I wrote, it's not nearly as good as the last blog post that I wrote, right? Just my grammar got better. The way I was able to explain myself got better. Just everything got better. So I think I made the decision after that as well, whereas my writing got better. So I think often, a lot of the times it is confidence, but the only way to build confidence is to do the thing that you want to become confident in.
Do the reps, yeah. So maybe the question I should be asking is, let's hear how long you sat and argued with yourself about committing to writing 400 blogs in 400 days. That's a bit of that's an unusual commitment for a lot of people, especially construction, house building people, right?
Yeah, I don't know how long I would have thought about it. I thought where it came from was Seth Godin. So I don't know, you're probably familiar with Seth Godin.
Yeah.
He has a lot of books out there. So he's great. He's just, I think he's great just in the way that he speaks and the way that he presents himself. He's like he's in the marketing world, right? He's very precise and meticulous in everything that he does. And he writes a daily blog post. And I was like, you know what, that'd be really good, but I don't have time for it. Right. But then I actually subscribed to his blog posts. And then I saw that some of them were like 2-liners. I'm like, oh, I had this vision in my mind that a blog post was like a big, long, like chapter in a book, essentially. And I'm like, I don't have time to write a daily blog post. Why would I want to do that? But then I saw that. I'm like, okay, well, if a blog, that kind of redefines what a blog post is. I'm like, I can commit to 2 sentences a day if that's what it turns out to. But usually what happens is that when you write one sentence, it flows into another and then another and then another. And then you get on a roll. And then eventually you have a few paragraphs of something. And then you're like, whoa, this is pretty good. And you can put it out there, right? So once again, it just came to action. So I don't know how long I was thinking about it. There's a lot of things that, like writing a book, I've always said I'm going to have multiple books. You just, once again, have to start somewhere. And I think it's just the confidence, but also one of the things, it's timing too, is that I have become more, I guess, strategic about where I put my time. Whereas before I was a little bit all over the place. To some extent, I still am. So that's why I have a good team to help me stay focused. But I've become more strategic in when I do things. So it's like, yes, I will write. Well, I do plan on writing multiple books. Who knows about what? But right now is not the right time, and I'm okay with that. So I know that it will come, but I know that the longer I wait, the better I'll be. The better that book will be, the wiser I'll be, the better writer I'll be, whatever it may be. And then eventually there'll come a time where I have the time to actually put into doing the second book, or the third book, or whatever it may be. So yeah, I can't say how long it took me to come up with that. It's just been something that's been on my mind. And then I saw something that proved to me that it was possible, that it was different than what I was thinking. And then I just committed. And usually it just, that thing for me, like public commitments help. If you just put out something that's public, this is what I'm doing and hold me accountable, sort of thing. It's like your subconscious mind forces you to keep doing it because you've put it out there. Whether or not somebody saw that is a different story, but your subconscious believes that somebody saw it.
Yeah. So coming back to where the rubber meets the road for growing the value of your business, has it impacted this exercise of publishing content in various forms? Has it impacted the kind of people that come to you for employment? Has it, what other collateral impacts has it made that you didn't expect, or maybe you've noticed?
Yeah, we definitely have people coming to us. One of the hires recently came out of the blue. It was somebody that we knew, but was working in another business. And she said, I actually saw this posting 6 months ago, but I didn't want to say anything about it because I just started she was working in our meditation studio that we had. And she's been a absolutely fantastic hire. So people definitely see what we're doing, and the people that it resonates with, they want to be a part of that, right? Not everybody necessarily needs or wants to be the leader. A lot of people just want to be I don't want to say follower, but they want to be part of that vision, right? They believe in it too, and they want to be a part of that story. And the thing is that even as a leader, if the most important person is almost a second follower, right? Because then the second follower, then it's the third, then the fourth, and then it kind of grows from there. So it's almost to be following or to be a part of something is just as important as leading something, because that by doing that, it inspires other people to also jump on the boat or the bus or whatever you want to call it.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's definitely been one of the advantages. Other advantages, like I said, we can definitely be picky and choosy with the types of jobs that we do now. We can be more creative. I enjoy my job a lot more because I am naturally creative. I like the creative side of things. Like when COVID hit and the construction slowed down a little bit, that was probably the 3 of the greatest months of my business because I was able to focus on the business as opposed to being in the business, right? And to some extent, part of me was waiting, not necessarily for a pandemic and people to get sick and so forth, but waiting for something to happen that affected the economy as a whole so that I could take advantage of all of the opportunities that come with things like this.
Yeah, I think that was a wise thing. It's something that I'm wanting to stress to these business owners right now. If there was one thing that you could really control in this time of chaos and uncertainty and just all these things that are making us confused about what the future holds, is that we can be really up upping our game, upping our messaging, upping our experience online while people, if that's what they're doing. If they can't, who would have ever thought that you couldn't go meet for coffee, shake a hand, come to our showroom. Let's bring everybody over to your house. That's like, who, you would have laughed at me if I said, you better get your act together online because that's going to happen. And you're just trying to sell me, Steve. But now it's like, this is an area you can really compete, show your national, your experience, your insights. You can really be upping your game here. And that's something that's huge right now, because this is not going to last forever. And all of a sudden, you're going to, it's like, who let the dogs out? All the economy is just going to come rushing back in. And you've leapfrog over your competitors because everyone's been trained to evaluate online first.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. If you can thrive or survive during these times, even, like, you'll be able to thrive in the other times. Right. So this is a good test for a lot of businesses. A lot of businesses have failed. A lot of businesses will fail. And because, they're saying that there's going to be a second wave, which there probably will. If you can set yourselves up to succeed during times like these, you're going to be laughing when, summer comes. Right now we're in winter, and it's cold. It's not great. Some people ski and snowboard in the winter, and other people freeze. Right. So you get to choose. That was something I've done business mastery with Tony Robbins twice. A lot of the stuff that you're talking about, the cycle of business, he does all that stuff. He talks about media. Like, it's all the same stuff that you're talking about too is important, right? There's a lot to think about in business. And this is just another season that's going to happen. But the thing about seasons is that they always change.
So in these interviews, what's one question that you wish people would ask you that they never do?
That's a good question. What's one question? One thing that I always come back to is really the importance of the psychology of the business owner, of the leader. And they always ask me the mechanics, right?
Right.
It's always figuring out the mechanics side, but nobody ever asks or wants, I shouldn't say nobody, most people don't ask or want to know about the psychology side. And what do you do to stay calm and collected when crap hits the fan? Right. And how did you get through? Yeah. And how did you get through the 4-year lawsuit? And how did you get through the pandemic? Like, all those things. Right. And there's mechanics, but there's psychology to all this. Like, how do you run a business, grow a business, deal with all that, and also be a husband and a father and a son, and do all that at the same time? Right. And I think people don't ask because they likely know and they don't want to hear it. Right? They don't want to know the truth.
So what is it they need to hear? What's the resource they need to consider? Or what is it?
You just need to take the time to work on yourself, right? Your mind is just like a muscle. If you go to the gym once and expect to be fit for the rest of your life, you're lying to yourself. You know that that's not possible. So why would you expect anything different for your mind? You can't just work it out once and expect to be set for life. It's consistent practice. But the thing about the mind, just like muscles, is that it's not just about going to the gym, right? It's not just about lifting weights. You also need to do cardio. You also need to eat healthy. Like, there's multiple things that factor. You need to make sure you surround yourself. So when it comes to the mind, those things factor in too. You need to take time to be in silence. I meditate every morning. You need to eat healthy, right? If you're not feeding the body what it needs, your mind is not going, it's going to be foggy. It's not going to operate smoothly. If you're overweight, and that's going to go into other factors. Maybe you get frustrated more easily, right? So these are all things. I realize if I eat food that's not optimal for me, I will get frustrated. I'm more tired. I can't operate on my peak performance if I'm not putting into my body what my body needs. And I think those are things that people know, but it's so much easier to watch the news, to feed your mind with garbage all the time. And then you wonder why you don't feel good too. And you watch the news 24/7. But to give you a side, like stand at the gate of your mind, right? Who do you surround yourself with? We often have friends, people that we call friends, that are poisonous to our minds, right? That are always negative, that always have drama, that are just dragging you down, but they're your friends, so you don't want to let them go. They might even be family members. But the hard thing, and the thing that you know you need to do, is you need to cut them loose, right? So these are all things that I've had to do, and they're not easy, but the more you do them, the easier they get.
All right, excellent. So if some of the Canadian audience is interested in learning more about what you're doing, where can they find you?
The easiest place is to head to caseygray.com, CASEYGREY.com. And you can also, where we're putting our big push and a lot of our time right now is on the Conscious Builder YouTube channel.
All right, excellent. And as far as the international audience, what do you have to offer for them, or where is that going?
Well, that would be the same thing, right? A lot of the stuff, yes, we're building in Canada. So a lot of the stuff that we talk about is building high performance buildings in Canada, but a lot of the concepts are the same. Obviously, when I talk about business is the same in terms of operating that. The other thing that we're working on is the Conscious Builder Academy that will be more directed towards helping contractors and operating their business. And, it's obviously going to have mechanics side to it. But we plan on putting a lot of the psychology stuff in there too, to help with that side of the business and life ultimately.
So if someone wanted to be notified when that finally goes live, where can they sign up somewhere?
Yep. ConsciousBuilderAcademy.com.
All right, perfect. Casey, been a good guest. I appreciate you. And thank you for being on the ROI Online podcast.
Thanks, Steve.